I stood in front of the apartment building where I used to bring Christmas gifts to families who couldn't afford them. Now I was about to move into one of those same apartments. My Rolex was gone. My cars were gone. My business was gone. Everything I'd built over 30 years was stripped away in a single courtroom hearing. But what hurt most wasn't losing the money. It was watching my own children testify against me, watching them call me a liar, a cheat, a man who hid assets and abused their mother. None of it was true, yet they believed every word that came out of Vanessa's mouth. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. My name is Malcolm Curtis Washington, and I need to take you back to understand how I ended up here, back to when I was young and hungry, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on in my mama's house. I grew up in Southside Chicago, where most folks didn't make it out. But my grandfather, Curtis James Washington Sr., used to tell me something every Sunday after church. "Malcolm," he'd say, gripping my shoulder with those strong hands that had worked in factories for 40 years. "A black man in America got to work twice as hard to get half as far. But that don't mean you stop working. You hear me?" I heard him, and I never forgot. By the time I was 25, I'd saved enough to start my own construction company. Nothing fancy at first, just me, a beat-up truck, and a toolbox my grandfather left me when he passed. I took every job nobody else wanted. The hard ones, the dangerous ones, the ones that required working through the night in winter cold that cut through your bones. But I showed up. I did the work, and I did it better than anyone else. Word spread in the community. Malcolm Washington finishes on time. Malcolm Washington's work don't fall apart. Malcolm Washington treats people right. Within 5 years, I was hiring crews. Within 10, I was bidding on commercial projects. Within 15, my company was worth $8 million. That's when I met Vanessa. She walked into my office one Tuesday afternoon, wearing a red dress that turned every head in the building. She said she was looking for someone to renovate her mother's house. I should have seen the signs right then. The way she smiled, too sweet. The way she touched my arm when she laughed. The way she asked questions about my business that had nothing to do with construction. But I was lonely. I'd spent so many years building my company that I'd forgotten to build a life. Vanessa made me feel like I was more than just a businessman. She made me feel seen. We got married 6 months later. For a while it was good, real good. We had 3 beautiful children. Isaiah came first, then Tamar. Then Khalil. I bought us a house in a neighborhood where black families were finally starting to thrive. 6 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for family barbecues every summer. I wanted my kids to have everything I didn't have growing up. Private schools, music lessons, college funds that would make sure they never had to struggle like I did. Vanessa seemed happy. She threw dinner parties where she showed off our home to her friends. She drove a Mercedes I bought her for our 5th anniversary. She wore diamonds I worked overtime to afford. But somewhere along the way, happy wasn't enough for her anymore. The first time I noticed something was wrong was at our church's anniversary celebration. We were members of Cornerstone Baptist, the same church my grandfather helped build back in the 60s. Pastor Williams was giving a sermon about faithfulness, and I looked over at Vanessa. She was staring at her phone, smiling at something on the screen. When I asked her about it later, she got defensive, said it was just a friend from college reaching out, said I was being paranoid. I wasn't paranoid. I was paying attention. Over the next few months, things changed. Vanessa started coming home late from her yoga classes. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped caring about the family dinners that used to mean everything to us. Our bedroom became a cold place where 2 strangers slept on opposite sides of the bed. When I tried to talk to her about it, she'd shut down. Or worse, She'd flip it around and make it seem like I was the problem, like I was too focused on work, like I didn't appreciate her, like I was the reason our marriage was falling apart. But I knew the truth. There was someone else. I hired a private investigator, not because I wanted to catch her, but because I needed to know if I was losing my mind. 3 weeks later, the investigator handed me an envelope full of photographs. Vanessa and a man I'd never seen before, holding hands outside a restaurant, kissing in a parking garage. Entering a hotel together on a Tuesday afternoon, when she'd told me she was visiting her sister. The man's name was Darnell Antoine Stevens. He was a divorce attorney. I confronted Vanessa that night, laid the photos on the kitchen table where we'd eaten 1,000 family meals, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and report cards. She didn't even try to deny it. She just looked at me with cold eyes and said, "I want a divorce." "Fine," I said. My heart was breaking, but I wasn't going to beg. "We'll split everything fair. The kids will be taken care of. We can do this like adults." Vanessa smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Oh, Malcolm," she said, "you really think it's going to be that simple?" That's when I should have known. That's when I should have gotten the best attorney money could buy. But I was hurt. I was angry. And I was stupid enough to think that being honest and fair would be enough. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, Vanessa filed for divorce. But she didn't just ask for half of what we built together. She asked for everything. The house, the cars, the business. And she claimed I'd been hiding assets overseas. Said I'd been abusing her for years. Said I was a danger to our children. Every single word was a lie. But she had witnesses ready to testify to all of it. People I'd never met who were willing to swear under oath that they'd seen me hit her, that they'd heard me threaten her, that they'd witnessed me moving money to secret accounts. I found out later that Darnell had paid them. Every single one. My children didn't believe me when I told them the truth. Vanessa had gotten to them first, poisoned them against me with her lies. Isaiah, my oldest boy who I'd taught to throw a football and change a tire, looked at me like I was a stranger. Tamara, my baby girl who used to fall asleep on my chest when she was little, wouldn't even take my phone calls. Only Khalil seemed uncertain, but even he kept his distance. The divorce hearing was supposed to take 1 day. It took 3. I sat in that courtroom and listened to lie after lie after lie, watched witness after witness take the stand and tell stories that never happened. My attorney was good, but he wasn't prepared for the level of fraud Darnell had orchestrated. Every piece of evidence I brought forward, Darnell had a counter for. Every witness I called, he discredited. Every argument I made, he twisted into something ugly. Judge Reginald Booker was a black man about my age. I'd hoped that might mean something. That he'd see through the lies, but the evidence looked bad. The witnesses sounded convincing, and Vanessa played her part perfectly, crying on the stand about years of abuse that never happened. When the judge made his ruling, I felt my entire world collapse. Everything went to Vanessa, the house, the cars, the business I'd built from nothing. My bank accounts were frozen. My assets were seized. I was ordered to pay her attorney's fees, and I was granted only supervised visitation with my children, as if I was some kind of monster who couldn't be trusted alone with his own kids. I walked out of that courtroom with nothing but the clothes on my back and $300 in my wallet. 30 years of work. Gone. My family. Gone. My reputation. Destroyed. Jerome Maxwell, my former business partner and one of the few people who still believed in me, let me crash on his couch for a week. But I couldn't stay there forever, so I found the cheapest apartment I could afford in the neighborhood where I used to volunteer. Studio apartment, roaches in the kitchen, radiator that barely worked. I'd gone from a 6-bedroom house to a room smaller than my old walk-in closet. That first night in that apartment, I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I'd lost the money, not because I'd lost the house, but because my own children thought I was a monster. Because everything I'd worked for had been stolen by lies. Because the system I'd believed in had failed me completely. I thought about my grandfather, about all those Sundays after church when he'd tell me to keep working, keep pushing, keep believing. What would he say if he could see me now? Then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in decades. When my grandfather died, he'd left me a small inheritance, $5,000 in an old bank account. I'd used most of it to help start my business, but there might have been a little left. I'd completely forgotten about it over the years as my own accounts grew. But now, desperate and broken, I wondered if there might be anything left in that old account. Maybe a few $100s. Maybe enough to buy groceries for the month. The next morning, I went to the bank. City National, the same bank my grandfather had used since the 1960s. The building looked different now, renovated, modern, but some of the staff had been there for decades. I asked to speak to someone about an old account. That's when Earl Thompson walked out of his office. He was an older black man, probably in his 70s, with grey hair and kind eyes. He'd worked at that bank since before I was born. He took one look at me and smiled. "Malcolm Washington, is that you? Lord, I haven't seen you since your grandfather's funeral. How you been, son?" I told him the truth. "Not good, Mr. Thompson. Not good at all." He invited me into his office. I explained what I was looking for. The old account my grandfather had set up. Earl nodded slowly and started typing on his computer. He frowned, typed some more. Then his eyes went wide. "Malcolm," he said quietly, "when's the last time you checked this account?" "Never," I admitted. "I used some of it 30 years ago to start my business, but I forgot all about it after that." Earl turned his computer screen toward me. I looked at the number displayed there. Then I looked again. Because it couldn't be right. It had to be a mistake. The account balance read $9,473,000. My grandfather's $5,000 inheritance had been quietly compounding interest for over 30 years. And nobody, not me, not Vanessa, not Darnell, not the court, knew it existed. I stared at that computer screen for so long that Earl Thompson had to ask if I was okay. $9 million. My grandfather's gift had grown into a fortune bigger than everything Vanessa had stolen from me. But here's what hit me hardest in that moment. My grandfather never knew. He died thinking he'd left me $5,000 to help me get started. He never knew that his careful savings and wise investment choices would one day save my life. I felt him in that office with me, felt his hand on my shoulder like all those Sundays after church. "Keep working, Malcolm. Keep pushing." I looked at Earl and said, "Nobody can know about this account. Nobody." He understood immediately. "This account predates your marriage. It's not marital property. But Malcolm, you need to be smart about how you move forward." Smart. That was exactly what I needed to be. Because the old Malcolm would have rushed back to court, thrown this money in Vanessa's face, and demanded justice. But the old Malcolm had lost everything by being too trusting, too honest, too naive about how dirty people could fight. The new Malcolm was going to be different. The new Malcolm was going to think like the people who'd destroyed him. I left that bank with a cashier's check for $50,000. Enough to start fighting back without raising suspicions about where the money came from. The rest stayed hidden in that account, growing quietly like it had for 3 decades. I went straight to Jerome's house. Jerome Maxwell had been my business partner for 15 years before the divorce. We'd met at a construction site where we were both working as foremen. He was the kind of brother who showed up, who kept his word, who had your back when everyone else turned away. When Vanessa took my company, Jerome had tried to buy me out, tried to keep my stake protected, but Darnell had blocked it all legally. Jerome had been the only one visiting me in that tiny apartment, bringing groceries, making sure I ate, never judging me for how far I'd fallen. I knocked on his door, and when he opened it, he took one look at my face and said, "What happened?" I walked inside and handed him the cashier's check. "I found my grandfather's old bank account. It's been growing for 30 years. Jerome, I've got the money to fight back now." Jerome's eyes went wide. Then he started laughing, deep, full belly laughs that filled his whole living room. "Malcolm, man, your grandfather just reached down from heaven and gave you a second chance." "I need to do this right," I said. "No more trusting the system to be fair. No more playing by rules that only apply to me. I need to find out exactly what Vanessa and Darnell did. Every lie, every paid witness, every piece of forged evidence. And I need someone who can prove it in a way that even a judge can't ignore." Jerome nodded slowly. "I know someone. Woman named Shanice Coleman. She's a private investigator, but she's not like the guy you hired before. Shanice specializes in legal fraud cases. She's testified in court dozens of times. She's expensive, but if anyone can tear apart what Darnell built, it's her." 3 days later, I met Shanice Coleman in her office downtown. She was a black woman in her early 40s, dressed in a sharp navy suit with natural hair pulled back in a professional style. Her office walls were covered with framed certifications and photos of her shaking hands with judges and prosecutors. This wasn't someone who cut corners or played games. This was a professional who built cases that held up under the harshest scrutiny. I told her everything. Every detail of the divorce, every lie Vanessa had told, every witness who'd testified against me, every piece of evidence Darnell had manufactured. Shanice listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Washington, what you're describing is textbook legal malpractice, combined with conspiracy to commit fraud. If what you're telling me is true, your ex-wife and her attorney could face criminal charges. But I need you to understand something. Building this kind of case takes time. We're talking months, not weeks, and we need to be absolutely certain of every piece of evidence before we move. One mistake, and they'll use it to bury you even deeper." "I've got time," I said, "and I've got money to pay you properly for your work." Shanice smiled. "Then let's tear this case apart and see what we find." But here's what I didn't tell Shanice right away. What I didn't tell Jerome. What I didn't tell anyone. The worst part of all of this wasn't losing the money, or the house, or the business. It was losing my children. Isaiah, Tamara, and Khalil believed I was a monster. And every day that passed with them thinking that was a day I couldn't get back. I thought about reaching out to them, writing letters, showing up at their schools or jobs, but Vanessa had poisoned them so thoroughly that any contact from me would just push them further away. I had to clear my name first, had to prove the truth. Only then could I hope to repair what she'd broken. Shanice moved fast. Within 2 weeks, she'd tracked down all 5 of the witnesses who'd testified against me in court. That's when things started getting interesting. Because when you pay people to lie, they leave trails, bank deposits, text messages, recorded phone calls if you know where to look. And Shanice knew exactly where to look. The first witness to crack was Keisha Andrews. She was a woman in her 30s who'd sworn under oath that she'd seen me hit Vanessa at a grocery store parking lot 3 years ago. Shanice found her working at a call center on the south side. Showed up during Keisha's lunch break with a folder full of bank records. Deposits from Darnell's firm totaling $15,000, made just days before the trial. Keisha took one look at those records and started crying. He said nobody would ever find out. He said it was just helping a woman escape an abusive marriage. He said the money was just to cover my time off work to testify. Shanice recorded every word. And did Mr. Stevens tell you what servants done to say on the stand? Every word, Keisha admitted. He coached me for hours, told me exactly how to cry, exactly when to pause. He even picked out the dress I wore to court. 1 down, 4 to go. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what Shanice discovered when she started digging into the financial evidence Darnell had presented. Remember, Darnell had claimed I was hiding assets in offshore accounts, had presented bank statements showing transfers to the Cayman Islands, statements with my signature on them. The judge had believed those documents were real, so had my attorney. They weren't real. Shanice found the graphic designer Darnell had hired to forge them. A kid fresh out of college who thought he was doing legitimate document reproduction for a law firm. When Shanice showed him what his work had been used for, he nearly had a panic attack. He handed over every file, every email, every instruction Darnell had given him about making the forgeries look authentic. I sat in Shanice's office as she walked me through it all. Malcolm, this is bigger than we thought. Darnell didn't just commit fraud. He orchestrated an entire conspiracy. He suborned perjury from multiple witnesses. He created false evidence. He may have even bribed court officials to expedite your case. This isn't just grounds for a new trial. This is criminal. My hands were shaking, not from anger, from relief, because for the first time in months, I had proof. Real, undeniable proof that I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't deserved what happened to me. That the nightmare I'd been living was built on lies. How long until we can take this to court? I asked. We need everything airtight. Give me another month to document every connection, every payment, every lie. Then we go to the district attorney first. If they agree to prosecute criminally, your civil case becomes much easier. 1 month. I could wait 1 month. I'd already lost everything. What was 30 more days? But I wasn't the only one counting time, because 3 weeks into Shanice's investigation, something happened that I didn't see coming. My youngest son, Khalil, showed up at my apartment. I opened the door, and there he stood, 22 years old, looking so much like I did at his age, it hurt. His eyes were red. He'd been crying. "Dad," he said quietly. "Can I come in?" I let him inside, offered him the only chair in my tiny apartment while I sat on the floor. We didn't speak for a long minute. Then Khalil said something that changed everything. "I saw Mum and Darnell arguing last night. I was coming home from work, and their bedroom door was open. They didn't know I was there." He looked at me with tears streaming down his face. "Dad, Darnell was yelling at her about money, about how much the fake witnesses had cost, about how they needed to sell your business fast before anyone started asking questions. Dad, I heard him say they'd made it all up. All of it." My heart stopped. "Khalil, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure about what you heard?" "I recorded it," he whispered. He pulled out his phone, played me an audio file. And there it was, Darnell's voice, clear as day, talking about the fraud, talking about the lies, talking about how they needed to cover their tracks before it all came crashing down. I listened to that recording 3 times. Then I called Shanice. "We need to meet. Now. My son just handed us everything we need." But here's what none of us knew in that moment. While we were building our case in secret, Darnell was building something too. Because 2 days after Khalil came to see me, I got a phone call that made my blood run cold. It was Jerome. His voice was panicked. "Malcolm, you need to get to the county courthouse right now." Vanessa and Darnell just filed an emergency motion. They're trying to have you arrested for violating the restraining order. They're claiming you've been stalking Vanessa and threatening her. Malcolm, they have witnesses ready to testify. If this motion goes through, you're going to jail." I ran to that courthouse faster than I'd run in my entire life. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. This was it. This was Darnell's final move. He'd figured out I was building a case against him, and now he was trying to put me behind bars before I could expose the truth. If I got arrested, if I got locked up even for a few days, it would destroy any credibility I had left. It would look like Vanessa had been right about me all along. And my children, especially Khalil, who'd just started to believe me, would think I really was the monster she'd painted me as. I burst through the courthouse doors and found Shanice already there, standing outside Judge Booker's courtroom with a leather briefcase in her hand. She grabbed my arm. "Malcolm, listen to me carefully. They have 3 new witnesses claiming you showed up at Vanessa's house last week making threats. They have phone records, they say, prove you've been calling her from burner phones. This is a setup, but it's a good one. Darnell knows exactly what he's doing." "I haven't been anywhere near her house," I said. "I haven't called her. I haven't violated anything." "I know that. But we need to prove it. And we need to do it in the next 30 minutes before this hearing starts." Shanice opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "I've been tracking your location through your phone's GPS data for the past month. You gave me permission to do that when you hired me, remember? Every place you've been, every movement you've made, it's all documented. You weren't at Vanessa's house last week. You were at the library applying for jobs." The courtroom doors opened. We walked inside, and there they were. Vanessa and Darnell sitting at the plaintiff's table like they owned the world. Vanessa was wearing all black, playing the terrified victim. Darnell had that same smug smile he'd worn during the divorce trial, like he'd already won. Like I was just a bug he was about to squash. Judge Booker took his seat. "This is an emergency hearing regarding allegations that Mr. Malcolm Washington has violated the terms of his restraining order. Mr. Stevens, you may present your evidence." Darnell stood up, smooth as silk. "Your Honor, my client has been living in fear for her safety. Mr. Washington has made multiple attempts to contact her, has appeared at her residence, and has made threatening statements to mutual acquaintances. We have 3 witnesses prepared to testify, and we have phone records that corroborate—" "Your Honor," Shanice interrupted, standing up. "Before Mr. Stevens continues, I'd like to present evidence that completely contradicts these allegations. I have GPS tracking data that proves Mr. Washington was nowhere near the alleged locations at the alleged times. I also have testimony from witnesses who can account for his whereabouts during every incident Mr. Stevens is about to describe." Darnell's smile faltered. Just a little. But I saw it. Judge Booker looked interested. "Approach the bench, both of you." Shanice and Darnell walked up to the judge. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Darnell's face getting red. Could see him arguing. Could see Shanice calmly presenting document after document. After 5 minutes, Judge Booker waved them back. "Mr. Stevens, I'm going to need more than phone records and witness statements. Ms. Coleman has presented compelling evidence that contradicts your timeline. I'm denying the emergency motion for now, but I'm keeping this case open pending further investigation. We're adjourned." Darnell looked like he'd been slapped. Vanessa's face went pale. They'd been so sure this would work, so confident that one more lie would be enough to destroy me completely. As they walked out of the courtroom, I heard Darnell whisper to Vanessa, "We need to talk. Now." But that wasn't the victory. That was just me surviving long enough to strike back, because the real move was about to happen. Shanice turned to me and said, "Now we go on offense. I'm taking everything we have to the district attorney's office this afternoon. Every forged document, every paid witness, every piece of evidence that proves conspiracy to commit fraud. Malcolm, by the end of the week, it won't be you facing criminal charges. It'll be them." 3 days later, Darnell Antoine Stevens and Vanessa Nicole Hayes were arrested. Not quietly. Not with a simple court summons. The district attorney sent detectives to Vanessa's house at 6 in the morning with a warrant. The news stations covered it. Local reporters ran stories about the corrupt attorney who'd fabricated evidence in a divorce case, about the woman who'd destroyed her husband's life with lies. Everything they'd done to me was now public record. My phone started ringing. Old friends who'd stopped talking to me. Business associates who'd distanced themselves. People from church who'd looked the other way when I lost everything. Everyone wanted to apologize. Everyone wanted to say they'd believed in me all along. I didn't answer most of those calls, because where were they when I was sleeping on Jerome's couch? Where were they when I was eating ramen noodles in a studio apartment? Fair weather friends aren't friends at all. But there were 3 calls I did answer. Isaiah, Tamara, Khalil, my children. They came to my apartment together, the 3 of them standing outside my door like they weren't sure they had the right to be there. I opened that door and saw their faces, saw the guilt, saw the shame, saw the realization of what they'd done to their own father. Isaiah spoke first. He was my oldest, and he'd been the hardest on me during the divorce. "Dad, I don't even know what to say. I believed her. I testified against you. I told people you were abusive when you never laid a hand on anyone. I destroyed you, and you didn't deserve any of it." Tamara was crying. "Daddy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have questioned it. You raised us better than that." Khalil just hugged me, held on like he was afraid I'd disappear. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was angry. These were my children, and they'd abandoned me when I needed them most. But they were also victims. Vanessa had manipulated them, just like she'd manipulated everyone else. They were young. They'd trusted their mother. And Darnell had been smart enough to make his lies believable. "I forgive you," I said. And I meant it. But we need to talk about what happens next. Because forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to normal. Trust has to be rebuilt. And that's going to take time. We sat in that tiny apartment for hours, talking, crying, beginning the long process of healing. They told me how Vanessa had spent months poisoning them against me, how she'd staged arguments, how she'd shown them fake text messages, how Darnell had coached them on what to say in court, making them believe they were protecting their mother from a dangerous man. "Where is she now?" Isaiah asked. "Mom, I mean." "Jail," I said. "She and Darnell both. They're facing multiple felony charges, conspiracy to commit fraud, suborning perjury, forgery, filing false police reports. The district attorney says they're looking at 10 to 15 years each." Tamara's face crumpled. "I know what she did was evil. I know she deserves it. But she's still our mother." "I know, baby girl. I know." The trial happened 6 months later. I sat in that same courthouse where I'd lost everything. But this time, I was the victim, not the defendant. Shanice testified for 3 hours, walking the jury through every piece of evidence, every forged document, every paid witness, every lie. Keisha Andrews testified too, crying as she admitted what Darnell had paid her to do. The graphic designer who'd created the fake bank statements testified. Even the court clerk who Darnell had bribed to expedite my case came forward and told the truth. Vanessa and Darnell didn't stand a chance. The jury convicted them on all counts. Judge Booker, the same judge who'd ruled against me in the divorce, looked at Darnell and said something I'll never forget. "You are an officer of the court. You took an oath to uphold justice. And you used your position to perpetrate one of the most egregious frauds I've seen in 30 years on the bench. You didn't just hurt Mr. Washington. You hurt every person who relies on our legal system to be fair. Darnell got 12 years. Vanessa got 10. The court reversed the original divorce judgment. Gave me back my business, my house, my accounts. Everything Vanessa had stolen was returned. I even got a formal apology from the court for the miscarriage of justice. But here's what most people don't know. I never told anyone about my grandfather's account. That $9 million stayed hidden, growing quietly in that same bank where it had always been. Because I realized something important. The money wasn't what I'd lost. The money wasn't what mattered. What mattered was my name, my reputation, my relationship with my children. I sold the business, didn't want it anymore. Too many bad memories. I sold the house, too, bought something smaller, something that felt like a home instead of a showpiece. And I took a portion of the money I got back from the business sale and did something my grandfather would have been proud of. I started a foundation, the Curtis Washington Foundation for Legal Justice. We help people who've been victims of legal fraud, people who can't afford investigators like Shanice, people who are sitting in tiny apartments, wondering if justice even exists anymore. My children and I are rebuilding, slowly. Isaiah started working with me at the foundation. Tamara went back to school to become a social worker. Khalil, my youngest, the one who first questioned his mother's lies, became a paralegal. They're trying to make up for what they did. Trying to help other families avoid the pain we went through. But I won't lie to you. Some things don't heal completely. There are moments when I look at my kids and remember them on that witness stand. Remember them calling me a liar and an abuser. Those memories don't just disappear. Trust is fragile. Once it's broken, the cracks always show, even after you glue the pieces back together. Jerome still tells me I should have come forward about my grandfather's full inheritance. Should have shown everyone I had more money than Vanessa ever stole. But I disagree, because if I'd done that, people would have focused on the money. They would have missed the real point. The real point is that justice matters. Truth matters. And a man's character isn't measured by what he owns. It's measured by how he acts when he has nothing left. My grandfather taught me that. Worked 40 years in a factory and saved every penny he could so his grandson might have a chance. He didn't know that small act of love would one day save my life, would give me the resources to fight back when the whole world had turned against me, would allow me to help others who'd been destroyed by the same kind of fraud that nearly destroyed me. I think about him every day. Think about those Sundays after church when he'd grip my shoulder and tell me to keep working, keep pushing, keep believing. He was right. A black man in America does have to work twice as hard to get half as far. But that doesn't mean you stop working. It means you work smarter. It means you remember where you came from. And it means you reach back to help the next person climbing up behind you. That's the real fortune my grandfather left me. Not the money in that account, but the wisdom to know what actually matters when everything else is stripped away. Thanks for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe. Have you experienced something similar? Share your story in the comments below.